today we have Greg Falck from Omen Foils.
I remember I paid some guy down there named Bruce, and I only had like $150. I was like, this is what I have for a lesson. He's like, I can't teach you to kite with $150. And I was like, well, we can start, right? So like, what advice I've given to wingers who are really interested in the Parawing, my first question is like, well, how long? I grab all of them, and then I do the armpit. And I've never had a full start. Like, you hear me like elegantly describing this technique, then you see me on the water, it's like I'm having a seizure. It's like, but I actually had an idea on this. I had this like tripod bag. I wanted to talk about this thing that I'm doing now with the harness. I've been thinking about this a lot since ditching the board leash.
And your background with Aluula is super cool for us to understand, like, where can we take Parawing materials?
You've got different high performance fibers, right?
Replacing your favorite wing with a Parawing is quite a statement these days.
And I really don't see myself ever using a 4-meter wing again.
Wow. Welcome to the Lab Rat Foiler podcast. My name is Dan, and today we have Greg Falck from Omen Foils, Omen Boards. Greg, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Very well. I've been following your videos on YouTube for a little while, up to the date that I heard my name on one of them. And I'm like, oh my God, he said my name. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Because those initial videos that I put out kind of was, you know, the purpose of them was to help people. And like you said, it was like something that helped you out. So I'm happy that you watched them. I'm not sure how much you watch them because they're quite long, but anyway.
I watched them. I watched the whole thing. Yeah, because I was trying to decide. I had that BRM, which I love the concept, and like obviously it was kind of the first one that you could go upwind. And then when I saw yours on the flow, I don't think I really would have looked at the flow otherwise. But I mean, I had, you know, essentially a winter season on the flow, and it was such a huge improvement. So yeah, I owe you one.
Those early days were really interesting because I have in my mind this little timeline of a sequence of events that happened that really changed the game. And I think the flow has like stamped its name in that history with the stability that they came out with, and then set the benchmark for what Parawings needed to have from that point on, which it was really awesome. And now we have so many options, man. Like, I don't know if you've been riding a lot of them, but there's a lot of good stuff out there. So it's cool. It's exciting to see. The evolution has been so quick.
Yeah, I haven't ridden a lot of them but I'm on the Ozones now, which I'm super happy with. I'm keen to try others, but yeah, I've been loving the Ozone wings.
Yeah, they're awesome wings, man. We have so much to talk about. We're going to be talking about location, spots, techniques. A lot of the stuff that you put online comes with this very analytical, technical kind of skew, which I love. So I'm definitely going to pick your brains on a few of those topics that you mentioned in your videos before. But before we start getting into all that juicy stuff, let's hear a little bit about you. I know you have a kite foiling background as well. I'm just curious to understand a little bit about your board riding history and what do you bring to parawinging in your bag of tools.
Yeah, I guess I got into kiting pretty early. My uncle had a trailer in La Ventana that I visited down at when I was 18, and I saw guys kiting. And even before then, like I think it was like 12 or 13. So this was like must have been the very early days of kiteboarding. I'd been at my cousin's place and they had a wakeboard boat, and I just like adored wakeboarding. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I had snowboarded and skateboarded, but I was always really attracted to the water side of it. And there was this guy with this like weird little booth at some community thing, and he was advertising kites. He didn't even have a picture. He just had like a brochure with like hand-drawn pictures of it and like prices. He told me about it, and I was like, I could wakeboard without having to buy a boat. And I was just like infatuated with that idea. And then, yeah, visiting my uncle and seeing these guys on sea kites. And like, I remember I paid some guy down there named Bruce, and I only had like $150. I was like, this is what I have for a lesson. He's like, I can't teach you to kite with $150. And I was like, well, we can start. Right. So like, yeah, we did like an hour and a half of lessons, and then my uncle lent me, which was his old sea kite, which is his like 2005. So that was a really old kite. And yeah, I just like dragged myself around the beach. And luckily it wasn't as crowded back then as it is now. But yeah, that was my kiting entry.
Did you get into like wake style riding initially because of your wakeboarding kind of background, or did you go for like, big airs or free riding? What were you doing?
Yeah, it was mostly just free ride. I was in like I was an engineer, so and I went like the military route.
Hmm.
So I really only like did serious kiting for 1 week a year when I could travel to visit my uncle in Mexico,
Yeah.
or maybe 2 weeks. And then I was like getting these intermittent light wind sessions. So I had a skimboard, like a big skimboard that I was kind of like my local thing.
Hmm.
And then just trying to boost as high as I could,
Yeah.
really when I was traveling, and some basic kind of like free ride freestyle tricks. And then kite foiling, when that came around, I was super into that just because
Hmm.
you could be on like the smaller kites that I wanted to be on, and go fast and get up in light wind. So that was really appealing. Um, but I was really only a light wind kite foiler. I
Hmm.
switched to strapless freestyle when it was, say, like 16, 17 knots and above. And that was, I got really into that. And yeah, the kite foiling was something that it was like, you weren't really, I wasn't on like the foil kite, so you couldn't really chase waves with it. Like you could
Yeah.
occasionally get some turns. And it was also, I was on a fast kite foil, so it just
Hmm.
didn't really work for, you just kind of do like one rip down the wave and a turn and then like be looping your kite.
It does
Um,
build your kite skills so much when you kite foil. I
mhm.
remember the few twin tip sessions I had after I started kite foiling. I went back to the kite and I'm like, oh my God, I can fly this thing so much better now because you do have to keep the tension on the lines and fly the kite more aggressively with the kite foil. So it's a great tool to learn how to fly a kite. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was pretty inspired by Greg, from BRM, just with
Hmm.
his like insane kite flying. And I never like got near that point, but I really enjoy the kite flying aspect of it. Something I
Hmm.
missed in winging, and
Yep.
parawinging too. It's not really like fun to fly a parawing, the same way that it's fun to fly a kite. Um,
Yeah. You can play around a lot with a kite. You did you well, so you did a little bit of kite foiling, and then you got into winging after that.
yeah, I think my first the kite foiling, and then I got into prone foiling as
Yep.
I got out of the military and moved up to the West Coast here about 10 years ago, and started for 2 years I had this kite adventure tour company on the North Island,
Hmm.
teaching kiting and taking people on like tours of some secluded spots up here. And then I got a job at Ocean Rodeo, so I could really like I was just into it, right? And they had a technical job with this new like material company, which turned into Aluula.
Yep.
And yeah, so yeah, I got into surfing when I moved down, so maybe like 7 years ago. And then as soon as I saw that video with Kai Lenny pumping, like I forget, it was around that like linking multiple waves, and I was kite foiling at the time. I was like, that is so cool. So I took my like 2 years of experience surfing, so I was already not a great surfer, but I was head over heels for it, and
Hmm.
went to foil surfing. And I was actually kind of a bit of a holdout with winging, like because I love foiling
Yeah.
kite foiling and strapless kite surfing so much, and surf foiling, and I saw the people winging, and it just kind of looked like, I don't know, there's nothing there for me. But
Hmm.
it's like then when you actually feel it and go downwind, and you realize this is not that far off prone foiling
Oh
when you're
yeah.
flagged out. Um, yeah, I tried it and fell in love with it. Mostly because, actually, I guess it was because Ocean Rodeo was building prototype wings, so I just got some for free. It's like, of course, you're gonna try. Which I had my prone foil set up, so I definitely
Nice.
struggled a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, made it happen.
Yeah, it's interesting how when a new sport comes out like that, it takes a little while for people to get good at it and make it look good, or sort of take it where it's interesting to a place where you look at what they're doing and they're like, okay, I want to do that. And the wing was like
Uh,
that to me as well. I looked at it and I'm like, nope, not for me. And when I saw people taking it into the surf, I'm like, okay, I get it. You can surf. And the progression from that feeling of feeling free, going from kite foiling to the wing, was pretty big. Like you said, surfing a wave on the kite is pretty tough. You might get slack on the lines for, let's say, 4 seconds, on a turn or something, and then you're powered up again. So it's a very minimal free experience. And then the wing kind of brought that to us, right? It brought us into flagging the wing and being able to go downwind or surf a wave. And that's why I got interested in it as well, and I got pretty into it. And then now Parawinging, mate. You when was the first time you saw the Parawing? Do you
Well,
still remember? Because now this question is getting a little old, I think, because people are like, wow, it's been a while now.
yeah, I didn't sleep on Parawing really. I was playing around with like a couple prototypes actually, like just an independent thing because
Hmm.
I had been doing the drop anchor thing with winging because I want a downwind sup, right? Like I saw people doing that as like that's what I want to do, but here the shuttling, the logistics just don't work out for it if you've got a job and
Yeah.
a life and because our coastline is so tricky for that. So that was really my substitute for downwind sup is like doing this drop anchor. And
Mm.
so I kind of independently came to that idea of like, oh, if we could have a foil. So I kind of built a few janky prototypes. And then I saw the pocket wing, the
Hmm.
Maui one. And it's like, okay, that's rad. And I think I asked him on Instagram, like one of his first videos, like, can you go upwind? And he's like, kind of.
Yeah, it's like,
And I was
it's
like,
just.
okay. Yeah. Then I saw Greg release his, and I had done the bar like a kite bar, whereas Greg doing it like a wing boom was
Mm.
like brilliant. And I think a lot
Hmm.
of people like it seems so simple to do that, but I do think that's a pretty brilliant little innovation, and it just makes it so much better. Because when I was trying to do it, it didn't work very well,
Yeah.
kite bar style. So then yeah, I ordered one of those as soon as I could. Um, Actually, I don't know if you know Jim Stringfellow. He's
No, who's he?
he's like a longtime foiling guy. He was making G10 foil wings in like the very early days. I think it's the first foil. Like I might be wrong, but it might be the first foil that Greg Drexler was on
Mm.
in those early days is his. And he's a photographer and he does all sorts of custom fuselages now. So um, if you have like a no limits mast and you want to ride Armstrong wings, he'll make like a custom fuselage for you. He's a machinist and he's based out of the gorge. Um, anyway, he had a BRM wing. He was like one of the first guys in the gorge to get like a pre-order or whatever. So I knew him and I was traveling down there. So I got to try one really early, um, which was awesome. And then as soon as I tried it, I was like, yeah, get me one. Because it was quite easy for me because of the kiting background and because of the
Yeah.
winging background. There's no real learning curve. And that was kind of the thing in my mind. Can you go upwind? And trying it, it was like, yeah, you definitely can
Mm.
go upwind. So that was like a sale for me. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that first session. I think a lot of people coming into the sport have really high expectations, and I think it's so variable. Like the result of that first session is so variable depending on people's backgrounds. And I believe you having kiting background, winging background, that's the perfect background to really understand everything that you need to and be very comfortable with lines and all that stuff. So tell us a little bit about that first session. What kind of gear were you on and what kind of wind were you experiencing and how did it all go?
Yeah. I mean, it actually was pretty bad conditions for parawinging because it was in the gorge and then occasionally you get the wind switch direction. So the current and the wind are in the same direction.
Okay.
And it was one of those days. But I was still like making like a bit of headway upwind, but like even with a wing, you could make up wind, but you're struggling. So that gave me confidence. What was I on? I would have been on my 60-liter flux, which is like you know, it's a, it's kind of like like a moderate mid length.
Mm-hmm.
But of course the volume is low. It's got a wide tail for stability and kind of like that to make it rise out of the water more is like to enable it to be used at a really low volume relative to people's weight. But it's definitely not a parawing board. But anyway, I could make it work just because I think again, like we said, kiting and winging, but I would always consider, it parawinging is like kiting, winging, and either prone in my case or downwind sup. So because even though I've never downwind sup, because I did a lot of prone and I really like linking as many waves as I can, my pumping skills and like wave reading skills were pretty good. And I guess like winging, I spend a lot of time just flagging out and trying to ride until I fall rather than using the wing as a safety. So I'd done a lot of training for the parawing, not realizing that's really what I was training for, especially at the early stages. So yeah, it was very easy to adapt. Like I just kind of pumped up on foil and it was was going. But I think if you've got that experience, then you'll have that experience. But if you've only winged and you're not focused on flagging out for 2, 3, 4 minutes at a time, then you could be in for some real challenges for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also the like flying the parawing, it comes very naturally to someone who flies a kite. It's literally
Uh-huh.
popping it up and seeing how it reacts, and then you're trying to turn it. You're like, oh, okay, I need a little pressure on the rear lines. Cool. And then that's it. Like I've seen
Yeah.
people that kite, grab the parawing for the first time, and I spend 10 seconds with them on land. They're like, okay, cool. And you can leave them alone and they'll keep the thing flying. And I feel like wingers, they take a little bit longer to understand how it reacts. When you're kiting to the level that I believe you were kiting as well, you're not looking at the kite. You feel every reaction on the bar, and it's
Uh-huh.
fine. You don't look at the kite. And it's the same thing with the parawing. As soon as you got it, like you're just focusing on the board. So it's almost like 50% of parawinging, is done. You know how to fly it, and you're
Yeah,
just focusing on how to get up, which is such an advantage. It's such an advantage.
totally. And I would say, like with kiting, most of the kiters I've talked to at various levels, it's like 90% of your skill at kiting is flying the kite, and 10% is your board skills. Even if you're into something like wake style, like you have to be, well, maybe not wake style, but it's so much kiting. When maybe parawinging is like 50%. It's more. Of course, the foil is more technical than say a twin tip, but it's still so much kite. So if you can just totally put that on autopilot, and like you said, yeah, flying the thing for 10, 20 seconds, it's like, okay, yeah, I get this. My brain is connected and it just goes away.
Yeah.
Um,
I've been trying to get people to do more land drills here, and like I do that just before a session, but I do it just to see how the wind, how strong the wind is. I just pop a parawing up just to have a feel for it, and I feel people don't do that enough. Sometimes I see people go out and they haven't even popped their parawing up, and it's all like tangled. I'm like, like just avoid, all that grief in the water. Just pop it up, set it up properly, and get out. So let's talk a little bit about that initial contact with the parawing. Do you have anything that beginners can learn from? Maybe some stuff that you were doing wrong that you picked up along the way, or something that might just maximize their time on the water?
well, I think the main thing I would say for beginners is like loading all that experience that I had onto it was the key, I think, to my like easy success. So I would say for people that are getting into it, if you don't have that, trying to build that out is going to be the key to your success. And if you try to, it's possible to build that out on a parawing, I think, but it's going to be awful. Like, I think if you took somebody that's never done any foil discipline and it's like, I just want to learn to foil, and you go out on the parawing, sure, like an athletic person could maybe do that, but I just think it's totally the wrong way to do it. So what advice I've given to wingers and who are really interested in the parawing, my first question is like, well, how long can you flag out for it? They're like, oh, usually I can kind of ride for 10, 20 seconds. It's like, there's no real purpose to you getting a parawing, because if you're only riding for 10, 20 seconds, as soon as you look down and start packing your wing, you're going to fall. And even if you do get it packed, or if you just grab it, and it's, in my mind, just grabbing it and not packing it down, you're only halfway. Like, it's kind of annoying and it flaps around if it's strong wind. I think packing it down is really key in my opinion. So if you just focus on your winging skills and flag out longer, and you get to the point where you can flag out 2 to 3 minutes, I think that's a way faster route to becoming a better parawinger than just throwing yourself into parawinging. Similar to like, pump foiling, like you can just pump foil with your wing flagged out and just try to get better at that, and wave riding. So I guess like, I wouldn't say anybody has to get a kite and kite foil. That would be like the long route, but really I think just like the wave riding. And then I think, like you said, like if you can, whatever board sport you can do is great. Like I have a surf skate, which is I think a really fun tool, and means, which actually on my side, I tried a few tacks with the parawing, and they just ended so terribly, just
It's
like hitting
fast, isn't it? That movement becomes so fast when you compare it to kite foiling. Kite foiling, you kind of like start going upwind. You put the kite up, you have time. you come off the turn and then maybe you loop the kite or not, but like it's a 3 to 4 second thing. With the Parawing, it's like a 1 second turn. It's so
Yeah.
whippy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, winging and kite foiling, the tacks feel similar. Whereas with parawinging, it's a unique feel. But my point was I grabbed a surf skate. We've got this road that goes perpendicular to the wind direction. And
Mm.
just on like a 15 knot day with the Parawing, I just did tack after tack after tack after tack. And then my next session, after I've never made a tack in the water, I think I got like 5 tacks in a row. It's
Nice.
just 2 hours of repping it out in wind that would have been terrible for actually Parawinging.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for a beginner would be the same thing if you're trying to learn to jibe or you're just trying to learn to fly it. Yeah, like you said. And I think if you couldn't surf skate, I heard somebody on your podcast talking about the one wheel. I think it was Ken Adgate.
Yeah.
I think that could be great too. Then you're not
That could be
falling on
cool.
the pavement.
Yep.
But even walking, like
I think so too,
Yeah.
man. It
Yeah.
could be very simple as walking down. And once you're trying to do a turn, walk downwind, simulate that, the jibe movement of going, downwind with the wind and see what the Parawing does. That I think, it's underestimated how land drills will like just exponentially help you grow in the sport. But I'm curious to see that transition. Once you started doing the tacks on the skateboard, what do you feel was the main thing for you to get it right on the water?
I think it's timing. I think it's 100% timing. It's just like when you send the Parawing over and when you release your hand and when you turn your body, if those are at the right time. So I don't even know if I could break it down and explain what the timing is, but I can feel it.
Yeah.
So and I didn't do 20 on the surf skate. I probably did 300 of them. So I just know how it feels. And because I know how it feels, I can do it. And I think that's kind of like what a lot of when I used to teach kiting, that was kind of my approach. As much as I could, I would try to isolate different things and then just get somebody to rep it out until, even if they can't explain what they're doing, they can feel it. And once you get that thing into muscle memory, you can almost like shuffle that away and then work on your next thing. And for the other things, I mean, you're a firefighter, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you probably do a ton of rehearsals, and my background is military, and we do a ton of rehearsals too. And it's like, I think it's something underrated. And in my YouTube videos, when I try to teach things, I'm often really pushing the dry land stuff. And I think most people don't listen to me. They don't take
It's
it
tough. Yeah. They
seriously. Like I had this foot switch video, and it was about like the key to me is like your hip positioning. It's all about if you move your body forward when you're trying to switch, you're always going to nosedive. But so many guys were like really involved and like always ask me questions about these really technical aspects. Like, when do I lift? When do I rise and this? And it's like, well, let me see how you do it. And they like step forward and step back. And it's like, well, you're never, no matter how many technical things you might get one or you might get 80% of them, but you're never going to be 10 out of 10 if you're not standing properly. And like with shooting in the military, like before you fire a shot, I would even say going from the Army to the Special Forces, like the difference between a really high performance unit and something in the Army is actually the attention to the smallest, most basic details.
Nice.
Like you spend so much time, like this is how you position your feet when you shoot, and then you just work up your whole body. This is how you hold the pistol. And we spend so much time on like your grip on the pistol, whereas in the Army, they kind of just put it in your hands and like, bad guys are that way. Like,
Yep. Man, I absolutely eat that stuff up. I love getting into the technicalities, getting into those details. And I think when you're talking about drills and, in the Army or in the fire brigade or anything, you do repetition because when the time comes to perform, there's obviously all that pressure of the emergency, but the conditions around you are so extreme. Like you might have a fire, people shooting at you, like all of what you have to do has to be instinctive. And I think with parawinging, it's the same. Like when you're out on a parawing, it's an intense thing. The parawing's there. Like sometimes you're overpowered and it's flapping and it's 25 knots. It's overwhelming. So, and I think it limits people because when you're in that state, you're like, oh, I'm not even going to try on, You know, like you just they get inhibited, and I think the repetition just gives you, or at least for myself, I feel confident when I'm prepared. And how can you explain to like a winger that wants to get into parawinging, how does it feel to actually just be on the parawing compared to a wing? What's the physicality around it? How does it feel in terms of, you know, comparing a turn on the wing, comparing a turn on the parawing? What are you going through, and what are you experiencing when you're actually riding?
I think with the Parawing, I would say it's like a lighter, less secure feeling, which, and it's like, and also it's very gear dependent because there's a big variety in Parawings.
Hmm.
But I think assuming that you've got a really nice Parawing and a really nice wing, even a really nice Parawing, it's a lighter feel. So you're more so foiling and less so winging. Whereas winging, I feel like you've got that security. You kind of like lock in and you can just blast.
Hmm.
Whereas parawing, you do that to extent, but it's like there's still a little bit more balance involved, even when you're just making a hard line upwind. And then especially when you're turning and like jibing, I feel like you're more kind of like it's a light touch on the parawing,
Yep.
and then you're flying the foil. Whereas winging, you can kind of just like crank into it, and even if
Mm.
you're not using the wind, you can kind of just like push and pull your wing to like stabilize yourself.
Yeah.
And I've heard that I didn't have this because I was had the prone background, but I've heard a lot of wingers when they did their first ride on the like they don't have the wing because you don't realize it, but you can like push and pull the wing up to balance
Hmm.
yourself on a
Hmm.
wave, and not having that, they feel this like very uncomfortable kind of like and it's more glidey. Like you just
Yeah.
really feel the glide of your foil versus being able to kind of hold on and balance.
The feeling of being connected to the foil with the like the minimum input that you can have, I think is what I've been chasing in foiling in general. And I think wingers, when they start getting a taste of starting to go downwind and being really reliant on the foil and what's happening around you in the water to keep going, I think that feeling is really easy to get hooked on. And it's getting over that initial hump, getting out there in the water, and getting your first flights. So, should we talk a little bit about some techniques in water start techniques? I've seen you get up on sinker boards. Obviously, you tried bigger boards as well. What can you help our audiences with in terms of getting up on foil on the Parawing?
Yeah, so I made a video on the stink bug start, which is like a little modification. Um, but I recommend that exact thing for the parawing. So
Hmm.
basically, you're straddling your board. You either have your parawing out or you deploy it, and then you drop down, scoot your butt back so that your weight is further back, and then put your elbow that's holding the wing on the board, and then
Hmm.
grab the rail with the other hand so that you're really kind of like hunched over the board and totally locked in. And then what I've been doing is taking the parawing and drop it just like a kite, dropping one wingtip onto the surface of the water
Hmm.
so that it's like whereas before I was trying to fly it above me, which works if you've got a lot of kite skills and you're paying attention, but it's easy, even myself and other people that are I think skilled, it's easy to kind of like let your hand twist
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're getting pulled over.
Very
So I like
sensitive.
that. Yeah, from the kite days to like your kite can sit fairly well on its wingtip and then it's pulling you that one direction so you can kind of get sorted out there.
Hmm.
And then it's pretty simple from there. You just pull in on it and you can kind of work your way to your feet. And then from there, it's, pumping the combination of pumping the board and pumping the wing. And I find there's a huge difference um, getting on swell versus flat water. Like I need an extra 5 knots to get going if I don't have any wave. Like there's a lake here that gets good
Hmm.
wind, but the chop is super disorganized and small. And it was stronger than what, like definitely at any wind that I've, like it didn't feel like super light wind to me, but because there
Hmm.
just wasn't any bump, I couldn't get on
That's
foil, and I
interesting.
was I was pretty surprised. Whereas yeah, even the smallest little bump I find makes a huge difference, and I think it also is like our board is specifically designed for that with the way the
Hmm.
rocker works and the tail, to be able to kind of gain speed going down a wave rather than gain speed specifically like only on a straight line. Um, if that makes sense, when the
Hmm.
the surface of the water is actually curved, it's a slightly different dynamic than creating that curvature through displacing water.
It's just that balance, because when you are on the sinker board and, there's a lot of bumps around you, even just staying in that position with your knees on the board, depending on how much the board is sinking, with the Parawing flying about is pretty tough. But like you said, once you are balanced and you pop the wing out of the water, getting a knee, your knee up and getting up, I think gets a little bit easier. It's just that initial balance. And then you're like, all right, here we go. You're up, and hopefully it doesn't take much. I find that when I'm powered up, I'm really going mostly downwind, especially with a small board. I'm not picking up speed going crosswind like a downwinder board. I think my angle on a downwinder board might be like 30 degrees, building up speed very slowly to the point where I'm getting lift. So I'm getting speed on the board with the board. When I'm in 30 knots, I go downwind and I pump more like a dock start. I try to get the board out of the water, release all the pressure of the board on the water. And then when I do that, I pump the wing. That's when I bring the wing towards me. That moment of being light, you want to maximize that. And then if you time that properly, it's a 3 to 4 pump thing, and you're up.
Yeah. I've been working on this thing, which is definitely not like a beginner technique, but if you're on your board and you kind of lean forward to pump and you start pulling in and you're leaning,
nice.
and then when the foil starts to like lift and you're unweighting, I like shoot my legs forward to like bring it forward, so you get that extra foil speed,
and then
you can push it back down. So you're almost like falling forward as you're pulling yourself like on the wing, and then shooting your feet forward, and then like pushing down and like falling forward and shooting it forward.
That's such a sup downwind paddle up technique, where you throw the paddle as far forward as you can, and you really lean on the paddle. And that's something I struggled with a lot. Was I was bending my hip and losing all that leverage. So when you fall, you really have to trust the paddle, and when you catch it, you scoop in, like you said, like as if you were standing on a rug, and you just try to scoop that rug forward. It's so interesting that you said that, because that's what a lot of the best paddlers tell you to do. Trust the paddle, the catch, and then just scoop that board forward. It helps heaps. I'm going to try that. I really like that idea.
Yeah, I find it's one of those techniques that, and I don't know if it's my skill level or the conditions, but sometimes I can't really do it. And then other times it's just like, it feels like the board, I'm just able to like drag it forward and get that. And it's also not something I've been doing a long time. Like I've only had a few sessions, but there's been a couple where I just like couldn't really bring it together, and was kind of just more doing the like traditional dolphin-y pump. And then, sometimes I can bring that together.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Another one that I heard, and I was speaking with Balls Mueller again, it was the pumping, the Parawing, but doing circular motions. So bringing it in, but when you bring it out, try to like scoop. Instead of scooping like this with the wing, you scoop like that with the Parawing. I thought that was interesting. I never tried it, but I think that might really be helpful in light winds. If you're really heavy wind, like strong winds, you're fine. But in light winds,
don't need it.
You want to make that Parawing fly as much as possible without losing the tension on the line. So that could be something interesting to try as well.
Yeah. So I think I did that intuitively, because with winging, I've done that where you push the wing forward and then go like it's almost like a rotational scooping. So I definitely do that with the bar. You don't want it to like flop out.
Yeah.
I think that was like, I'm not a big believer in that kind of pumping. I think it is more like you're trying to get the wing to move through the air forward as much as, and generate lift that way, rather than generate kind of a perpendicular lift through like opposite the direction of movement.
I love those technical bits, because man, we can discuss that. What's better, what's worse for so many, for so long, and then we get in the water and it all goes out the window. You're like, oh God. You can't do it.
It's like you hear me like elegantly describing this technique, then you see me on the water. It's like I'm having a seizure. It's like, okay, like this guy does not know what he's talking about. Like
it's like, it sounds good. Do as I say, not as I do.
That's the hard thing as you film yourself too. It's like I never filmed myself doing stuff, but until Omen, and then I watch videos. I'm like, that's what that looked like. Like,
I
oh my
know.
God, my
It's terrible.
brain
It's very
looks so
cringy.
much better. Yeah.
But it at least, like, if it helps people, I think it's so cool, man, to have some of that stuff documented as well, just for longevity. I love that,
Well, it
and
helps
people,
me. Like,
yeah,
I learn a lot when I do a
mm,
video tutorial on any topic. Like, I always learn something just because I'm just like, I don't have too many negative commenters, but I'm just like, I'm almost like going to war against some like hate filled guy on the internet. So I'm like really trying to like buttress up what I'm saying. And
yeah,
um,
bulletproof.
yeah, yeah.
It is like that. I mean, YouTube is a vortex of everything. But to keep the those comments coming, let's talk about another thing that's super hard to do on the Parawing, which are the pack downs. Very unique to the sport. Something that all of us had to learn how to do from scratch without much reference out there. What is your pack down technique today when you're going to go for a full stow, getting rid of the Parawing? What's working for you?
Well, when I had the flow, it was really easy. Those lines they're almost like the Q power line. They're stiffer.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
found I just grabbed the thing, like all my line. I never did like just the front lines.
Hmm.
I just depowered it, like stalled it, all the lines, packed it in, grabbed the lines, packed them in, bar in, and it was like easy. Um, with the ozone, which I love how much it cranks up wind. It has a, yeah, I love everything about that wing, but except for the lines, I
Yeah.
find them, you just like the first few times I almost went back to the flow despite
Mm.
the characteristics of the ozone, just because I put the Parawing in, grab the lines, put them in, and they'd come out and out, in, out, and out. And I'm like on the wave, like, what is going on? And then eventually I just stuff the bar and I've got all these lines, and then you fall and it's all over you. It's like, fuck.
Yeah. It goes all
Um,
over the place quickly.
so now my technique has been like, I grab all of them and
Hmm.
then I do the armpit.
Hmm.
I don't remember who I learned that from, but then I actually go down the lines until I feel the bridles. And then I like come underneath and grab like trade hands.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I stuff that, and then there's nothing left, really to have to stuff in.
Hmm.
But and I've never had a false start. Like it comes out really really well.
Yeah.
Um, but I actually had an idea on this, and I think so. I had this like tripod bag, and
Okay. Here we go.
I only tried it once and it filled with water, so I need to cut a hole in the bottom. This is a recent thing, but I almost think that to separate the bar from the
Oh.
Parawing is going to be an idea. So like, um, if you, as soon as you charge like down, you grab the lines with one hand. If instead of going armpit and having to deal with that, if you could just isolate the bar in a
Hmm.
bag, like this is not the perfect bag, but something that kind of like stays open but is going to hold it, then you've
Nice.
got both hands available to
Like
pack
a little
your
holster
Parawing.
thing.
Yeah. And then it's always gonna, because the only way you can tangle a Parawing is if the Parawing inverts through the lines, which is hard to
Hmm.
do, or if the bar passes through. So if you can isolate your bar, you're always gonna get redeploys
Yeah.
clean. So I don't know. I
Interesting. I
haven't been
like that.
doing
I
that.
like that because you also isolate that annoyance of the twist. Sometimes it's just a twist of the lines when you're packing
Uh-huh.
down. You know, you pack it down and then you're going to put it in the bag, but somehow it twists itself before it gets there. So when you redeploy, there's no tangles, but there is a twist on the lines that you have to like maybe loop the Parawing to get rid of and keep going. Sometimes you get away with it, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Um, have you seen those little belt clips that people have been 3D printing? So it's basically there's a guy on the Parawing group on Facebook, Michael Shepard. He's been printing these little hooks that you put in the belt. So it has a little opening. You slide it through the belt, just like a harness hook.
Uh-huh.
And what it does is exactly what you said. So when you depower, instead of putting it on your armpit, you just click it to that belt. And then you
Yep.
have two hands to put it away, stash it away. You could even leave the bar there, which is kind of like this little holster clip, or you can remove the bar from that, put it in the belt, and flip it over. I'll send you a link when we're done, or post a link on the YouTube comments description section so you can check it out. And
Yeah, I like that. And it would be cleaner than like riding around with a bag.
Yeah, but even what you said, like of having a bag, but if you have the, the belt that they come in, but they have maybe two sections where you can put the bar in one section and then the bit in front of it is where you stash the Parawing just to separate them a little bit. I can see how
Yeah.
that can help when you're redeploying. You go for the area with the bar, bring it out, and then you bring out the Parawing. That could be something that helps.
Yeah. And to kind of like go back to army things, they have this thing, like the inspiration for this was a drop pouch. So back in like, I guess the military really changed when it went into Afghanistan, right? And
Mhm.
guys were training to, like, you're shooting and you take your magazine out and you put it back in the proper pouch, which of course, like, are you really going to do that in combat? Well, actually, yes, you do if that's what you're trained to do, but you might get shot in the process of doing that because but anyway, then the way they started training is when you're shooting, you just rip your mag out and chuck it. But then the
Yeah.
compromise is you have this pouch. It's kind of like a climber's chalk bag that kind of like stays open. So when you're dumping mags, you just drop them into that pouch. So that's kind of what I was thinking. And the clip in my mind, I think I love things that are clean like that, and I love how clean that idea is. My criticism of it would take longer to like find the place and index and clip in
Mhm.
versus just dropping it, and then you still have something like it's still exposed, so there could be like a line that loops around somewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can stick it in a pouch,
Get rid of
um,
it.
then there's nothing that can loop up or tangle. So, and I think there's going to be like different levels of minimalism depending on your skill and your comfort with these things. Um, so yeah, there'll probably be all types of harness setups that come up.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I also love how the pocket rocket flies. Just rips upwind. It's
Hmm.
such a good Parawing. One of the easiest ones for you to learn the tacks. When you're going upwind with it, it really doesn't have that pull. It doesn't lift, and it doesn't want to, like, it disappears, which is good on attack.
Yeah.
But those lines were really something that just threw me off completely. And when I was redeploying, I was like, why is this tangling so much? And it just feels like a shoelacy kind of very, it's just very prone to tangling, which is unfortunate. But I'm sure this is going to be rectified very quickly. And I think the other thing that those lines are not really great for is because they're so long. I just recently been riding the Kaha and the Kanaha,
Hmm.
and their lines are so short. And I really feel that for redeploying efficiency and success, the short lines are just absolutely game changer. Like, it gives you so much in terms of the fuel and all that. But for stowing, redeploying, it's literally like an arm length and you're on the leading edge on the Kaha. And I think I was out for an hour and a half with zero tangles, zero. And I had one little line on the bar that I had to take out for the whole session, and I think that's due to those really really short lines.
Yeah. The only thing I like having longer, I almost want as long of a lines as I can handle
Mm,
because I want the extra upwind. And I don't mind having to do my technique where I like double back and grab. And like now that that's been kind of sorted,
mhm.
um, I'd rather have an extra, maybe if it's 3 or 4 degrees upwind, I'll take that
Mm.
over like that ease of use. So, but then again, I also haven't tried those new BRM wings, and I know guys are raving about them. And I think it's cool that he's got the different options for different styles.
Yeah, that came
Um,
quick.
that came very quick.
Yeah,
Um,
but I like what you're saying because the your setup will be so unique to your spot. Like you said, you do want
mhm.
to maximize the upwind angles because that's the type of riding you do. Tell us a little bit about your spot. What's Vancouver Island like compared to Hood River or other spots in the world that kind of make it unique and good for parawinging, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I think it is good for parawinging. We've got we've got lots of spots, I'll say, and then we've got really strong currents. So what's good can change on a given day.
Yeah.
You can have strong wind and sometimes not great waves, and other times it's not that strong, but you get these really nice waves, similar to what can happen at Hood River. Our main spot is like, you know, right downtown basically, and there's a point with a bay, and when the current actually floods in with the same direction as the wind from the west, it creates this back eddy which kind of shoots out
Nice.
past the points and creates these standing waves. So yeah, there's like a back eddy there, and then you can basically, there's this place called the Chinese Cemetery that you can downwind basically to that Chinese cemetery and then come back up, and then there's another spot further downwind that gets waves when the current is flowing out, called Harling Point. So those spots are really good, and you get some really big, nice days there. Like it's a pretty rad spot. It's not consistent like Hood River, but you could get 3 or 4 days of sailing, which is nice.
What have other people taken up the parawinging in your area?
There's a few, yeah. I think it's not as like when I went down to Hood River, it's definitely catching hold faster there. And I also just think because our spot doesn't work great for downwinding logistics wise, there's not, I mean, I think we only had 1 or 2 guys that had got into downwind sup properly. And even them were like not really doing it because they didn't have friends that were shuttling all the time. So it was
tough.
pretty limited. So there's not that kind of like crew of people that are trained and ready to go. So yeah, there's 2 guys that ride with me, Sam and Finn, and they're both like on it right away. And then a guy, Chris Curran, who's really good. He was on it. But I don't think I've seen anybody else. I think we will. But I think a lot of people with Parawinging too are kind of like waiting for V2, waiting for what people say is good for boards and all that kind of stuff. But definitely at Hood River, it's catching on.
I think it's fine. That'll come. There's this initial influx of people who I think kind of like really got into it, that want to take their riding to where the parawing allows you to go and all that stuff. But the second wave now, I believe, will be the wingers. All those wingers that are kind of, yes, I'm waiting for better gear. I think the V2s from Greg are absolutely such a step forward. Like the top end was really where I saw the biggest improvement. So not much on the bottom end. The bottom end feels like very similar to all the other Parawings out there, but it feels like the top end of an ozone. You're smashing up wind, and it's just the drive that the Parawing has is enormous. And we don't talk too much about drive. And what I mean by it is just like how much wind does it like eat up, going upwind, and it makes such a difference instead of having that thing that is just kind of just pulling you downwind and like grunty kind of vibe. So that's where I felt the improvement was. And if you are a winger, I saw one of your videos that you said that a Parawing replaced your favorite wing.
Yeah.
So explain that to us a little bit, because replacing your favorite wing with a Parawing is quite a statement these days.
Yeah, well, like I would say my favorite wing was a 4 meter, and I felt like I could almost only have a 4 meter. Like with my 66 liter board, I can get it up in such light wind, and I've had it like in really strong days, and just on those, the storm days where I'm on the 2.5 or the 3 are one thing, but those just like solid filled in days. The 4 is just, I've had most of my best sessions on that 4 meter wing, and I really don't see myself ever using a 4 meter wing again.
Wow.
Because I'll be parawinging. But that being said, I'm not at all interested in a 4 meter parawing. Like I'm on because my 4 meter sessions were on like a prone board with winging. Whereas now my 3.6 pocket rocket and my 66 liter, that's kind of like my like light wind parawinging setup, which is maybe, let's say, 16 knots. But if it's 14 knots for me, where our conditions are, I just so much rather have the 5 meter wing and be like backwinding and playing around with little sections. And it's just, I think that part of winging is still really fun and engaging. And I actually almost love it more now because of how try hard parawinging can be. Yeah. So I really appreciate just like the ease of use. I think we were talking before the podcast. It's like, just because you learn to backcountry ski doesn't mean like you're going to skin up a groomed run. Like you're still going to use the chairlift and do some groomer days. And you'll probably appreciate just, eating groomers for an afternoon after like doing like an epic hike to get, head high powder, some obscure place.
Where are you going with this? Because that's possibly how it's going to grow, isn't it? Like wingers having a 3 wing quiver that depending on the conditions, it might be their smallest wing or, the wing they use the most. There is one of them that can be replaced for a parawing on the days that those conditions are great for parawinging. And that might be the thing you do that day.
Yeah. On my video there, I had said that I'm replacing my like 3 and 4 wing with Parawings, and then like with I think a 2.5 and a 3.5. And then with my I'm going to keep my 2.5 inflatable wing for like the crazy storms. And that was just my experience being overpowered on a Parawing, and then keep my 5 for the light wind days. I might actually reverse on the small wing. I think I'm going to get the 1.9 pocket rocket. And I just after being at Hood River,
it would be incredible.
Yeah. I was in some like really strong, nasty wind in Hood River with the 2.4, and I was definitely overpowered, but the swell was just massive. And like, and I was like, okay, this is fine. Like I'm doing fine with these gusts. And if I had the 1.9, I'd be like comfortable. So we get some crazy winter storms. So I can't really say until I get those kind of like, 30 knot gusting 45 knot days, whether that 1.9 is going to be good or just a hazard. But I think I'm going to renege on that and say like, oh yeah, I'm just a 5 meter inflatable and then Parawings.
Interesting.
Yeah,
we had like 3 days of 30 to 40 knot wind here in Melbourne, and it was just crazy. The smallest Parawing I have is a 2.9, the Kaha.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had sessions where I was just getting yanked out of the water, flying downwind, like super fast, trying to get rid of it. Super sketchy. So I think for me, those days, a 1.8, 1.9, a sub 2 Parawing would be amazing. And I might not use it a lot, but when you use it, it's worth every penny, because that session is something you don't experience all the time. And I still have a recollection of being in the middle of the bay, and the whole bay looked like snow because of all the white caps and all the just spray that was everywhere. It was just such a unique feeling. And those are the things that I think, you can get into. And I had 2 other guys on wings, and they were just flying downwind as well. That's a bit sketchy session, that one.
Well, that's one thing I'll say is like the difference between the 3 pocket rocket and the 2.4, as far as like the ability to handle like that blasting wind, was profound. Like I was really surprised how much easier that was. So now I've just kind of have pretty high expectations of that 1.9 in terms of handling those crazy storm days.
Yeah. You mentioned a little while back that you were really kind of keen to get into SUP downwinding, and your conditions really didn't, like, just the shuttling didn't work. It was really hard for you.
Yeah. I wasn't even keen to get into it as much as I was just jealous of people that could.
Yeah. Like, she's like, oh, these guys are surfing downwind. Like, I want to do that.
Yeah. Like when I'd be in Hood River, I'd see these guys just like with just like totally open and gliding. And for me, like I had that sensation through the drop anchor, but now I've got this wing I've got to go chase down. And one thing I liken it to is like, have you ever rock climbed? Any climbing?
Yeah.
So there's this feeling like, doesn't matter how high you are up. Like, let's say you're 100 feet up and you're in a book frame, like, and you're climbing like that, you kind of feel closed in and safe. Whereas when you're on the opposite, you're on a corner and you just get this like sense of exposure. I find downwinding is like that, but in like a good way rather than like a like clench way.
Yeah.
It's just like letting go of the wing, like not having it and just being in that openness and having all these options. It's just something changes in your brain, just having that completely open up for you. So I knew that feeling from drop anchoring and doing that, but it's just such a pain in the ass to do it that most of my sessions I wasn't drop anchoring. So I would see these guys just gliding by with their downwind SUPs and be like,
They're having a good time.
Yeah, but it's like I knew if I went and got the board and did all that stuff that I would just be like, to do it, I would have to convince other people and shuttle. And my problem with foiling is that I don't foil enough. Like I'd want to foil more, and that would just kill my foiling time. So, that's one of the reasons when I saw the Parawing. And now, like when I was in Hood River, I'm on my 66-liter board with nothing in my hands, and I look at a downwind sup guy carrying this paddle, 8-foot
Oh
long
my
board,
God.
just like, like I have no sense of like I want to do that at all anymore.
So for you, the Parawing doesn't replace all your wings, not yet.
I
Um,
don't think it ever will. I mean, maybe I'll
mm,
eat my words on that, but I don't think I'm going to be parawinging. Like, there's just so many, like below here, the local conditions. I think it would be different if I lived in Maui or Oz, where I think sometimes
yeah.
you've got 13, 14 knots, but there's these like beauty swells that are cruising by, right? Then I could see why you'd want to have a downwind sup and a 5-meter parawing.
Hmm.
Whereas for here, I mean, I guess I could drive 2 hours to where we're more exposed to the open ocean, but
The
realistically,
2 hour drive.
I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. Um, so yeah, I just don't see it. Like I don't even if, and I don't like when I had a 4.2 D wing.
Hmm.
That wing, it's also the heavier fabric, so it just
Hmm.
in the conditions that I needed it to work in, it didn't fly. So even though I got that at the same time, the 4.2 D wing and the 3 ozone, it was like I had the same low end with the 3-meter ozone
Mm.
just because it would fly so much better. Whereas the
Yep.
D wing was coming out of the sky. And I think if I was 220 pounds, that'd be a totally different story because
Hmm.
I would need that D wing when it was, let's say, 16, 17 knots. But because I'm only 185 or like 85 kilos,
Hmm.
yeah, I didn't need it. Whereas I think the Ozone 3.6 is like a really good size for me that it's still, and it's the lighter cloth. So it
Yeah.
flies better in that kind of like lighter wind. But yeah, I just don't see going a bigger for myself.
Yeah. I don't do, I have a 5.5, but I don't use it. And
Yeah.
it's something that I thought I would be kind of interested to use it. Maybe even like I thought about even like freestyling with it might be interesting and everything, but it's just so big, man. It's such a
Uh-huh.
clunky thing to get up. And I think I cap out at the 4 meter as well. Around that
Uh-huh.
range, I think is good. I'm 85 kilos with all the gear as well. So I think that makes sense for me as well. And now that we're going to have a lot more top end on these V2s, you will be using that for, and you'll be able to hold it in up to maybe 25 knots, which is a huge improvement. I think they capped out around 20, 22 for me, like that
Uh-huh.
ability to go upwind. So that might improve. And then, but the 3.6, I know Flo has a 3.7 now. I don't have that one. But that 3.5, 3.7 range, 3.8, I think is going to be my biggest one as well. I'm not going to go
Yeah.
bigger than that.
But you still downwind paddle too. So is that going to be your light wind thing?
Ah, mate, I don't look. 9 out of 10 times I'm on the Parawing, and
Yeah.
I can't remember the last paddle session I had.
Uh-huh. So what would you do if
It's
it's 13 or 14 knots, or just go mountain biking or something?
I'll go kite foiling.
Kite foiling. Yeah, kite foiling
Yeah,
is fun. Yeah.
kite foiling is still so much fun, and something that, like I think when I get back to it, I can do all the stuff that I was doing the last day I started. I don't lose it. Like it's so ingrained in me that I go back and I do all my tricks, have a lot of fun, and I start, you know, exploring some things or something that comes in Parawing. I'm like, oh, let's try this in kite foiling or anything
Yeah.
like that. So I
I'm still
think,
having fun like that with the 5-meter inflatable wing. Like
yeah.
there's so much stuff I'm still learning that I don't really feel like it's a compromise and it's something I'm trying to get rid of. I feel like and especially now that I'm winging less, like that progression is going to be slower. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that quiver.
Have you noticed anything that the Parawing gave you in the winging side, like something that crossed over from Parawinging to winging that you're like, oh, I'm better at winging now because I'm doing this on the Parawing?
Well, I don't know technique wise, but one thing that I've changed is I listened to your podcast with Ken Adgate, and
Yeah.
he mentioned about having the harness hook higher on his
Mm.
chest. And as soon as he said that, it's like, oh yeah, of course you just adjust the angle of the wing instead of flying like this to just fly so it's more efficient. So I haven't got the chest harness yet, but I've started taking my harness, whether it's parawinging or winging, if I'm doing a long upper run, and just like scooting it um, up higher so that I've got that toe point
I
like
like that.
higher up. And it's nice. I especially, and that's one thing I love about the ozone harness. I know everybody on your podcast that I've heard is all geeked out on the ozone harness.
Mhm.
It's like, it's so good. But one thing I haven't heard mentioned is the panel on the back is so slippery. The other one I used, it was like, it sticks to you. So
Catchy,
you can't like,
yeah.
it catches on your wetsuit. Whereas this one, it just slides everywhere, which
Which one were you
traditionally
using before? Was it just the BRM one?
the BRM
The
one.
V1, because I think they have a V2
Yeah.
now as well that I haven't used or seen. But it's that it's like a shiny fabric on the ozone.
Yeah, I've got it here actually.
You've got it there.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that. And it just slides on neoprene so well.
Yeah.
And it's not something like if I was designing a harness and I hadn't seen one, I would probably be like, oh yeah, want it sticky to stay in place. But now that especially now that I'm hiking it up, it's so nice to just be able to like, you can flip it forward and back so fast. And then it just slides right up to the like kiting. You hate that when it happens, when your harness rides up, you're constantly trying to like
annoying.
keep your harness in the right spot. Whereas yeah, it's the opposite now because of that, what Ken said about keeping the point of toe higher.
Are you like, now that we're talking about gear and stuff, do you use any wing leash or any leash at all?
I don't use a wing leash. And then I also learned from your podcast to stop using a board leash.
Yeah.
When Greg said that he doesn't use a board leash anymore. I do think it's sketchy. And I know that I'm going to get in trouble at one point.
One day it'll happen. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's been awesome. I sure loved it in the meantime. The only time I got in trouble, so I've changed my harness setup a little bit, which we can talk about in a bit, but I had a 3D printed hook that I was using. And this is a Jim Stringfellow idea, the guy that I mentioned to you earlier. Rather than having the harness line on the bar, which I find is annoying, super annoying to have an extra thing on the bar, he just has a hook and he hooks on to the bar from your harness. So anyway, I had 3D printed this hook and I was riding and I had the no board leash, and this was I probably had like 5 sessions with no board leash. So I was really comfortable with it at this point. And then the hook snapped, like my 3D print broke. So my Parawing just went.
You lost both. Oh,
and then my board shot out and I was just like, and this was like Hood River and it was, 35 knots. And I was just like, so I got the board, which wasn't actually that hard. And then as soon as you're on your board, it was easy to get to the Parawing. But I have had it once too. This was with the Flow, where my Parawing, I don't remember what happened, but it like flew away and then it landed like this.
I had that.
And it went so fast. And like my 66 liter board, it paddles quite fast. But I was going as hard as I possibly could. And it was only, 20 meters away from me, but it was going up basically so it took me maybe 10 minutes to close that distance. And the whole time I'm thinking, man, if I get gassed and back off a little bit, it's going to start gaining. So I got it. I've never had that happen with the ozone. And I think maybe I'm just lucky, or maybe it's because it's that super, I think it's like a coated nylon. So it's floppier fabric. So I'm wondering if it would just like not be as rigid with the like heavier polyester.
Dylan from the X Foils, he spoke about losing a Parawing. That's how he lost his. He lost his Parawing on the water like that.
What one was he on?
I think he was on the North.
Okay.
But after that podcast, I was doing just like a session with the ozone, and that happened to me with the ozone. So,
damn, I was hoping it would.
Yeah, it's like it was something happened as well that I just lost. It just pinged out of my hand, but it flew like it was a proper like 6, like, oh my God. And then I'm like, great, it'll be easy to catch. And like you, I'm like, oh, I'm not getting to it. And then I noticed the leading edge sitting outside the water, the bar, upwind, perfect, just like catching a little edge. But what happened?
Was your bar sitting on the Parawing too?
No, mine was just, it was
dragging.
It was dragging. So it was keeping it kind of there.
Well, mine, it was the Parawing was like this, and the bar was sitting on the canopy perfectly. So it wasn't even causing drag. It was just like, and it wasn't strong wind. Like it was maybe 20 knots. So
and it flies downwind. I was on the 85 liter board, like you, paddling my ass off, and I only got to it, and it took me 10, 15 minutes when it started to collect a little bit of water and slow down. And then I saw that was like maybe half the leading edge was out. I was making some ground. But I was like, man, you can lose a Parawing if it falls in that right position. It could happen.
Well, that's a point for the longer lines.
True.
I think maybe if you have the longer lines, it makes it or let's start filling our bars with lead shot. I think the key I've been thinking about this a lot since ditching the board leash. I think what Ken is doing is kind of the ideal, is that you've got your stash pouch, your fanny pack, and then you've got your chest rig with a backup Parawing. Because if I was riding my 2.4 and I had my 3 as a backup, and I had that situation where I just like blow up, I can grab that 3 and I can sail back to my board. As soon as I get back to my board, it doesn't matter how far that other Parawing is. I'm gonna chase it down.
That's a good point.
But I think that's kind of like the leash is the second Parawing, which I'm not carrying at the moment, but I need to start. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't go out all the time with a second Parawing. I do like those sessions where you're just riding the gear. I don't ride a harness or anything. It's just a Parawing and board. I love that. I love that feeling. But for Hood River, I'm building these backpacks because I'm imagining that we're going to be in the water for 3 to 4 hours without coming to land. Like we're going to be doing upwinds and downwinds and all that stuff. So I'm packing in a little bag that has some water, some stuff for food and whatever. But you can put 2 Parawings in your back or 1, depending on the Parawings that you're taking out. And you still have your pouch to, put it in your belt and swing it around and ride with nothing in your hands. And then having something like Ken, I haven't tested it yet, but I'm going to put my Dakine leash hook on top of that. And the last thing that he said that I'm like, Ken, you're a genius, a little pouch for some music. And I never go out with music. I'm like, and I've seen people do it before. And I did a session with music the other day, and it was incredible. I felt like,
tried it either.
Oh man, it was so cool because you just download all the tracks to your phone, so you're not streaming anything. And then I have a little Parawing playlist. It was awesome, absolutely awesome. So that's
I should try that. That is cool.
That's the kit for Hood River. That's what I'm trying to build, and I'm building some of the boys these bags as well because they're like, oh, can you do it for me?
I think you might be, for Hood River, I think you might be overrating how hard it is to get to shore. Like, I mean, if you're doing a big downwinder, that's one thing, but and it is cool because the gorge changes and the spots change as you go downwind. So I think it would be nice to have that. But I would gamble that most of your riding is going to be like you're going to post up at Rufus or the hatchery and you're just going to blast upwind and then you're going to come downwind. And if you want to drink a water, you go in and get it and go back out. And I think your more minimalist approach is going to be nice there.
The one thing that we will be doing is we're going to be testing a lot of stuff there. So I want to have a few Parawings on me to just switch in the water quickly and try to get that immediate back-to-back feeling, which is always hard, because conditions are always so variable. But yeah, I might be overestimating a lot of stuff here and just like packing a lot of gear I will never use, but we'll see.
Yeah. I've also, I wanted to talk about this thing that I'm doing now with the harness. Actually, how can I adjust the camera here? So as I know you don't use a hook, and I think you should, especially if you're doing like the upwind, downwind.
Yeah.
So all I've got now is, this is just Lark's headed on, which the ones you buy they have like a proper clip, just like the hooks do. But I think this is better because I can lay flat and it doesn't slide around. And I don't want it to slide around. And then I'm using a carabiner, which I just ground the little nub off.
Oh, yep.
So where's my... So basically I can just like clip this on, and then I've got these little like ridges. So if it's super powered up, I'm just there, and then I'm just on my backhand, like like you would with kiting, where how you're often just kiting with your backhand. Or if it's like, more like in the proper range, then you're maybe more back here with your hand over top of it. But this is like you go upwind way better, or not way better, but it's just so much more comfortable to lean against it.
And you have the bar further up as well when you're using it. Like you said, maybe not chest high, but just like...
Yeah, I kind of like, I have it, I guess I set the size of it so that it sits nicely on my hips. And then I just go as far up as it'll go, which is about here. Nice. So it kind of just sits right under my tits. And yeah.
Nice. I like that. Those kind of webbings with a little Velcro that come with the Parawing. You can even have one of those on there and have that carabiner, because the carabiner is quite large. You can have a little smaller one and just connect it to the loop on the bar. So you might always have just a connection point to your harness line on the bar without any harness in there, without any line in there, and then just have the little hook and have a little bit of a smaller carabiner there.
Yeah. I for the longest time, I just had a hook, which I think I'm going to go back to. The only reason for the carabiner is not for the bar. It's so that I can clip it to myself.
Gotcha. Put it away on the belt.
Yeah, and it's just because my hook broke and I rigged this up. But I think that the key is going to be a hook that has Velcro on it, and then a patch of Velcro on the harness, so you can just like, stick it to your harness and then quickly grab it. Because that was what I was finding with the hook. What I would do is I would like pull it around and stick it in the pouch, which worked well. But it's just like every time you do it, it's 3 or 4 seconds, and which I could be riding away for that time.
Yeah. The one thing you mentioned that could be cool as well, like on the Ozone, you have that little kite knife pouch, a little pouch like that where you can just slip that little hook in. If it's a flat hook, you could just maybe put it in that one.
Yeah.
Does it fit?
I tried. It didn't. My other hook was bigger. And it's kind of behind your back, right?
Yeah.
And I am using the Ozone little knife now, just as a extra little safety.
I think it's worth it. I think it's definitely worth it.
I gotta play with it, but in my mind, and of course I haven't done it, so grain of salt, but having Velcro on the hook and, not a carabiner, just a plastic hook, and just being able to like stick it there.
I like that.
And then you can just rip it off, stick it on. I think that's going to be key.
I like these little, little paradigm shifts where we're like, oh, how can we do the harness line on the bar? Like, we're not doing it on the bar, we're doing it on the harness. I love those little pivot points where we're just rethinking how we're approaching it and taking a completely different angle to solve that problem. So I'm gonna try some stuff from the harness, whatever it is, towards the bar. I think that's a great tip because I don't like having anything on the Parawing when you're depowering, stowing. You want that thing clean. Like having a double line thing for me is out of the question. If I have a harness line, and I think I will have to have a harness line for hood, I'll have a single line. And now you just made me maybe have it on my belt, not on the bar itself, because I was thinking of just having one line and just have like maybe a little elastic that just keeps it within the bar, and I can still ride it, and then it kind of disappears. I'll have to test those things. Now I don't have too much time now, man. It's like the 26. I have to come up with these answers pretty quickly now.
Yeah, the hook works. The hook works so well on the bar, and then like you said, it keeps your bar totally clean.
Yeah,
that's my only complaint with it is just like when I first had it, it was just dangling, right, and which is really annoying. So it was really just how do you get that thing away? So the carabiner was because it broke, was just a really quick solution a couple days ago to be able to clip it to myself. But I do think the Velcro is it. I mean, I always say that when I think of something like that, and then you try it and you're like, there's going to be some problem, but
they will find it. I like where you're going with it. I'll try it as well. And we'll keep texting each other back and forth until we get somewhere interesting. Greg, I want to talk about another video that I learned heaps from, and it's more relating to downwinding and connecting waves and reading swell. You post a video out there that I think is really interesting for people to understand how swell works when it comes to set waves and wind swell that just comes over those waves. Can you explain it a little bit to us? What bumps are we supposed to look for in the water, and where within a set of a couple of bumps should we get into when we're starting to, get into going downwind and catching those bumps?
Yeah. So this is actually something I think I learned from Dave Kalama's episode on the Progression Project years ago. And it was that, and it's a hard thing to say, but it's that when you're looking at waves, the set moves at half of the speed of the wave. So if you look at an individual wave, that's a small wave, as it progresses, like, or rather, I guess like a set of waves, the front wave in the set is actually dying because the set is not keeping up with the wave speed.
Hmm.
So if you get on the very back wave in the set, that wave is moving through the set as it progresses. So you get the longest ride. So
Hmm.
what I'm trying to do is I'll get on that very back wave and then I just keep trying to gain speed and then dropping back. And if I can keep dropping back, I stay in those like good waves the longest.
Every time I go out after watching that video, I'm like, just look for the last one on the set and keep dropping back. And you can almost visualize that bigger bump in front of you and the three bumps just ahead being, the ones you don't want to get to too much. And that's obviously
Yeah.
if you're surfing, right? Because if you're racing, you're just plowing through that stuff and trying to overtake everything that you possibly can. That's such a
Mhm.
cool explanation. I love that video, and I really encourage everyone to go and have a look because the graphs you have there make it very, very easy to understand.
I thought that was going to be our most popular video because I see so many wingers like it's so many wingers at the intermediate level, which is of course most wingers. That's their main thing is they want to be able to ride forever. Like they want to be able to downwind. Um, so I thought people were going to be super into that, and I thought like I spent a lot of time kind of like distilling like everything I've learned. Um, maybe it'll be one that grows. Whereas something like my foot switch video got a ton. I wasn't expecting that to be like that was
Mm.
just something I kind of cooked up pretty quickly. And it's like, oh yeah, like this is how you
It's
switch
weird like
feet.
that
Yeah.
sometimes. The stuff you're not expecting just gets a lot of attention. But look, I think I'm a huge fan of that video, and I watched it a few times. And I love just the graphs that you got in there, and the visuals are super helpful just to have that mental picture of it. And when you're in the water, I have those mental images with me of bigger bumps, kind of encompassing these small little swells on top, and yeah, it's a lot of pattern recognition out there, which is so cool. Like when you're starting to connect and stay on foil for a couple of Ks, it's just that pattern recognition on the water and looking at stuff and looking at those opportunities that you can jump on. And yeah, I think I'm still surprised at how many people are not into it. I'm like, well, how are you not into it? Even if it's a short upwind, downwind leg, which they do on the wing,
Mhm.
that's what they do. They go upwind, flag the wing, and ride their swell. And I'm like, how are you not getting into downwinding, man?
Well, I think it's hard. Like
Yeah, it's hard.
I guess I'm almost the opposite. I'm wondering why parawinging is taking off like it is, and that like even though
Mm,
I like for me it's a dream. Like I couldn't be happier. Like I almost it's like pinch myself that
I
this
know.
this
I'm giddy.
exists and I can do it. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
I'm giddy with it. Like, but looking at a lot of people ride and how long they can flag out, it's like if you're riding for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, it's just why parawing? Like
Mm,
you're just it's going to be so frustrating for you to move to it. So I do think it's like that there has to be a transition. I think downwind sup like where we are anyway, like it's just not there's not very many people. And I think probably if you're in Australia or Maui, you're like, oh yeah, most people are downwind supping. But I
mm.
think most of the world, like Europe was a huge market, so many
Europe,
places in the
huge, yeah.
US that are, you know, just not conducive for downwind sup. And people are winging and just the level at which they're winging at and what they're in it for. And I
Mm,
don't think I don't think parawinging is it just doesn't have that. And people struggle with winging, right? Like it's these things are tough. You're
mhm.
coordinating multiple axes of control on a wing, multiple axes on the board. Like there's so much going on that I think people are pretty overwhelmed with the progression of that. And then to
Mhm.
add something that makes it like significantly harder, I think is a lot for people. So I don't know. I don't know. My prediction is winging is going to be a lot bigger than parawinging will be,
Mhm.
um, just because of that accessibility.
I think it's just that evolution of where 80% of the foilers are in their ability and their
Yep.
skill level. A lot of those people who are winging and they're just going out to just to mow the lawn sometimes, they just want to get out in the water. They're not into tricks. They're not maybe not even tacking. They just want to get out and sail. I think those people could have a lot of fun on the Parawing. A lot of fun. You could scream upwind. It's something for you to fly a little more, like, and have fun flying it. And that's where I think, people might have, like you said yourself, one or two Parawings in their quiver. And there are days out there they'll look out and say, I think today is a Parawinging day, and take it that way. How much it grows, God, so hard to say. But I think you have a cool background. And when I think about where the sport can go, I feel that the progression has been so quick in the designs of the Parawings, looking at these V2s now. Where is the sport going in terms of materials? I mean, your background with Aluula is super cool for us to understand. Like, where can we take Parawing materials, or is this it? Like, is ripstop the thing?
I think ripstop is the thing, and I wish I could say more, but knowing, like, having studied ultra high, because there's like, you've got different high performance fibers, right? You've got the main ones that would be used in a Parawing are nylon, polyester, or ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. So ultra high molecular weight polyethylene is what is at the core of Aluula. And if you're looking at really any other really high performance fabrics, there's other options like aramids, like Kevlar and stuff like that, but they have UV sensitivities, and they also, when you fold them a number of times, just like if you take a carbon fiber and it's not wetted out with resin and you fold it like this, like a dozen times, it'll just break in your hands. So these aren't just they're not applicable to something that has to flutter. Whereas ultra high molecular weight, it has like an amazing folding endurance. Like, you'll never tire it out. The problem is it's really expensive. And that cost goes up exponentially when you make the yarns of a higher or of a lower denier, like a thinner yarn.
Thinner line, yeah.
And then it also doesn't stick. Like, it's very slippery, and coatings don't stick to it. Whereas polyester and nylon have a higher surface energy, so you can stick a coating to them. So it's and so like when you're dealing with heavier fabrics, you can take this ultra high molecular weight polyethylene and take a film and bond that film in some process to it to basically stabilize your material. So now you don't need a super tight locked in weave. You have your film to provide the bias, and just, when it sews, it doesn't come apart. Whereas when we're looking at the weights of Parawings, we want something, well, like kite and wing canopy is 55 GSM, and we definitely want to be below that. Yep. And I think ideally in that 30 grams per square meter. I think the ozone is like 32. Yep. Yeah. So one, I think this industry has already been pushed really hard, because you can look at guys that have a single skin paraglider that fits in like almost the same package as our Parawings. Like, there's a lot of R&D already in that from paragliding. And I don't see anything like fundamentally different about like the design criteria for a fabric for Parawings versus a paraglider. Like, obviously, like, ours get wet in salt water more, but it's not like a paraglider can't get wet. Like, it has to be able to get wet as well. It gets hit by UV, gets hit by flutter. All this, in my mind, like looking at it from, if I were to design a high-end fabric for a Parawing, I don't think ultra high molecular weight is that like useful. Like, they do have some really, really light materials. So Dyneema makes like a laminate with polyester film, and they use like a really fine adhesive to glue a non-woven ultra high molecular weight. So it's really expensive. It's like something like $30 to $40 per square meter. So it's, so you'd probably
How does that
increase
compare with like a ripstop in terms of cost? I'm just curious, because I have no idea of that.
Yeah, it would be like probably 8 times the cost.
Oh, wow. Huge. Yeah,
but
enormous.
But yeah, so let's just say it would double the cost of your Parawing, though.
Yeah.
Roughly. So some people could afford that, but then the problem is those materials, the polyester has a really bad folding endurance. So, and it's not great I don't think UV really matters for a Parawing, because it's not like it's a kite where you're like sitting it out on the beach, but I think you'd have that flutter issue. And then I also just think it's overkill. Like, you don't really need it. So I kind of think the battleground is going to be, in terms of materials, is going to be between like nylons and polyesters. So,
and is that the difference between what Greg's using with the BRMs and what everybody else is using, basically, with their? I don't know what Greg's using.
Yeah, I don't know what he's using. Yeah, I don't like a nylon. Like generally they'll have like silicone coated nylons, which you can feel it because it like your hands feel slippery after you touch it
Hmm.
because you get some of
Oh
that
yeah.
silicone on your hand. Whereas a kite fabric, it's more crispy.
Yeah.
And that's because polyester is stiffer inherently than nylon. But nylon is lighter than
Hmm.
polyester. So you could get a lighter fabric by going nylon. It absorbs a bit of water and it's worse in UV. So that's why it hasn't been used for kite canopies,
Yeah.
because you'd get it toasted in UV and then it absorbs a bit of water, but it absorbs about 3 or 4% of its weight in water compared to polyester, which is something like 0.2%. And then ultra high molecular weight is 0. It doesn't absorb
Yeah.
anything, but it's like something like more than 10, 15% lighter. So it's even with it like absorbed water, you'd still have a weight advantage using
Hmm.
nylon. And I think the UV is probably not a consideration because like somebody that's used a Parawing for like 2 seasons, how many hours of UV has it really seen? I don't think it's
Yeah.
that bad. The kites that get toasted are because they're left on the beach and they're sat to flutter
Yeah.
in the wind.
So we're saying that material wise, not that we've reached, you know, the end game, but you don't see too much advancements. I was really hopeful for materials to become lighter, to become more malleable, and like you said, you know, that crispiness of the ripstop when you're trying to get air out can be a
Mhm.
deterrent. Like you just have to squeeze it, and it doesn't really breathe that well. And the one thing that I think the BRMs have is as soon as you depower it, you have it in your hand, it disappears. It's
Mhm.
just like it go, and you're like, how has it released all that air? It's so interesting to kind of double click on that.
That's a great point. I haven't actually considered that porosity.
Mm.
Um, so I think the conventional thinking would be when you add porosity and let it breathe, that you decrease sail performance. But there is a thought that when you have your sail and you're creating like your high pressure surface here, and this is your low pressure surface, like
Hmm.
it's just a wing, that if you have some amount of porosity, that it helps your the
Like
flow on the
the
backside
drive
adhere.
that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, like there are some flight wings that actually pump air out onto the top surface of the wing to adhere the flow on the back, so you could get. So there could be a study done, like there should be a study done by one of these bigger companies of like what is the ideal amount of porosity, and maybe the ideal amount is 0, right?
Hmm.
But maybe it's not.
Yeah.
So, and that would be a great coincidence if the ideal amount of porosity also like makes the wing easier to pack.
Interesting. Well, I felt a lot of difference between the flow to the ozone already. Both 32-gram ripstop, but I felt like the flow was a little bit crispier, and the ozone when it was wet, it became a little bit more sticky to
Mhm.
redeploy. It didn't have that crispy kind of redeploy. Is that a coding thing that differentiates one from the other? Because I think Flow had a 38-gram material initially, and then they went to 32 across the board.
It's probably a coating and material thing. My guess would be the ozone is nylon, but I it could just be coating. Like
Hmm.
I just don't know. Um, but if it's just a coating thing, then that's obviously not really affecting performance as far as like the fibers itself. But if you are using nylon, one of the downsides of nylon as well as the water thing, which is not really, is it's stretchier. So even
Yeah,
though you
that's
could get a
tough.
lighter Parawing of the same strength, like you could, if you had a polyester Parawing and it was 32 GSM, I could have the same strength and tear resistance with say like a 27-gram
Hmm.
Parawing, but my wing is going to stretch more than yours,
Yeah.
and it's fairly significant. Like it might be like twice as much or something. So you might lose aerodynamic performance um, at the high end. Like my Parawing would probably be better in light wind because I could fly it
Mm.
and it would stay in the wind. But then when I get like really lit up, it's going to start bagging out, whereas yours would stay crispy and
Nice.
go upwind better.
That's so cool, man. I love that technical stuff. Um, where are we going with this, Greg? Where do you think, the next wave of growth will come from for parawinging? And who's the next wave of adopters for this sport?
Um, I think it's wingers, and I I I guess I'm curious about two things. It's like I'm curious how many people are subfoiling in a year or two from now. Like my prediction is it's only going to be some guys that are really into racing. Cause I think there's like a beauty and purity in like, I've got a board and a paddle and a foil, and you've got a board and a paddle and foil, and who can go there fastest. Like, even though it's not personally what I'm into, I think that is like a beautiful part of the sport, and like using those waves. And it's almost like the most pure form of foiling. It's just like, who can, all you've really got is a foil and your muscles and waves. And so I think that's awesome. But I think that's not what most people are looking for. Like, most guys that have a job and are paying retail for their gear are like, they're looking to go out there and ride waves and like, dance with nature. And I just think the Parawing is a way better tool to do that. My prediction is that we're going to go higher aspect with the Parawings. And I think, like, I look at the Ozone compared to some of the others, and like, that is clearly a higher aspect. And I kind of see that going further. But I guess it's contrary to maybe what you're liking with the shorter lines, because you'd have to kind of, I think, I'm not a Parawing designer, and like, I don't know, but in my opinion, to go higher aspect, you probably have to go longer lines, like, or else it would just collapse the wing, Because in my mind, the dream is like, and I don't think this is necessarily achievable, but it's like kite foil, like kite race foil upwind, combined with, like basically like foil assist, like you're on a small board. And so yeah, finding that aspect ratio, that's the balance between usability. But although interestingly, like with kite foiling, I've tried some of the bigger foil kites and they're really janky to use. I don't like how slow they turn. But then when you try like a 4 or 5 meter, because it's slower, I almost prefer a 4 or 5 meter foil kite to a 4 or 5 meter leading edge, just because it stabilizes. So I almost think, like, when we're talking about 2-3 meter Parawings, having like a really stable high aspect wing is not going to be a downside. Like, I don't really care how well it turns compared to, whereas like when you're talking about a 12 meter kite, like, you really don't, it's so slow if you have a really high aspect 12 meter kite.
But I just like to pick people's brains and understand where they see where it's going. Is there anything that we need to know about Omen Foils? We haven't touched about your boards, man. Like, honestly, I love your the board picking tool that you did. I'm going to give you my answer for what my perfect board is. It's the Emissary High Performance Wing and Prone 44 liters. That's what it gave me as a result. And I love what you're doing. You make it very approachable, very easy for people to understand what boards they want to use, very customer centric. So just give us a little, information about Omen Foils, your gear, and what you suggest for people to choose for parawinging.
So yeah, for our boards, we've got, our line we started with the Flux. That's our original board. And I think that was quite progressive when it came out, because it was, rather than the like boxy boards at the time, it was longer and narrower. Now I think it would be kind of considered a more moderate board, but 2 years ago it was quite progressive. So there was a lot of R&D that went into that hull shape and keeping the tail wider to allow you to ride a smaller board, because it creates lift when it's submerged. Like, it basically acts like a wing, and then when it gets to the surface, it's stable. So I think that was really what built Omen as a company, is guys that were looking for like a 90 liter board would try our 60 liter, and never dreaming that they would be on a 60, and then like getting up in lighter wind than they were on their 110 liter kind of like pizza box board, and just like blown away. So I know, because I can see the sales and like the locations from Shopify, it would be like we would go a week or two without a sale, and then we'd sell a board at one place, and then it would arrive 10 days later, and then like 5 days later we'd have like 3 or 4 boards sell in that area. And then like it would just, we'd have these pockets that would grow, and it's just, I'd always get the like, oh dude, like I went out on my 60 liter and everybody's laughing at me, and then I was the only one up and riding. So that really, like, that's awesome. I don't know, solidified us in winging, is having that board that was like, a lot of R&D went into just making it more efficient, like a more efficient hull, specifically for the speed range you go through to get on foil with it, with a typical wing foil, or prone for that matter. So then our next board is called the Emissary, which is basically a more extreme version of the Flux, in terms of like, we're compromising user friendliness to make it just like more efficient. And riding smaller foils. So, and it's kind of confusing because we have 4 small sizes from 28 to 55 that are really like prone and high performance wingboards. And they kind of have that, it's a more pulled in tail than the Flux, because we're really focused on, once that board is up in the surface, like how can we make it as efficient as possible through fluid dynamics, and using like different computational tools. Whereas and that's like kind of that more projection rather than taking off on a wave. Whereas things change when you get to the 66 liter, and the 78 and the 90, to really being, and my goal when I first started doing that board, my goal was actually to make like the perfect drop anchor board or like light wind board. Because using the 60 liter Flux, I didn't like the paddle back to my wing. So I was like, I want something that I can get. And also
That's interesting.
my big wing, I'd have to use like a 5 meter to get up on my board if it was light wind or whatever. So let's say it's a 4, it would fly away quickly. So I wanted to be on the smallest wing possible. So I started designing those boards as like a high performance, low energy board that like would use the minimal drag as possible. So, and then through that process, Parawing became a thing, and I really started orienting that design towards specific to the Parawing, rather than just like a typical light wind board that has compromises for high wind. Like so it has that light wind ability while also like doing super well when it's like, 40 knots and super messy. So that process was really just like using CFD tools and building different variations, like, CAD versions of the board, and then competing them against each other at various angle of attacks and various speeds through the water, and kind of learning what we did there, and then building other variations, and just kind of like continually honing down on like what is the least amount of drag in this speed range, in this angle of attack range that we can create with a board. So that was really the genesis for those boards, and it's why I think they're working particularly well for Parawing. And I think when you go to Hood River, you'll get a chance, because there's a bunch of them out there with Parawingers right now.
Nice. Yeah, I want to try them, man. I'm a sucker for people who build things that have your mindset, like super data driven and technical, and they like the data, they like the challenge of numbers and the correlation of numbers and feeling. I love that stuff. So and I feel like you're that type of person. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you love that stuff.
Yeah. There's very little artistry in the boards, like, and it's actually something. I was talking to somebody that shapes surfboards, and because he's buying one of ours, and he's a great surfboard shaper, and he was like, "Oh man, like that'd be so hard to do what you're doing." And I was like, I feel the other way. I would be so intimidated to shape a surfboard, because you can't quantify it. Like, it's just all experience, and like this rail transitions to this, and it's just so much. It's so nebulous and so based on feel that I don't think, like, I bet I could shape 20 surfboards and like still not really know, is this doing this? It's like there's just so many competing variables, because there's all these different ways that it interacts with the water in different directions. Whereas a wingboard or parawing board or prone board, it's like there's only a few things that it has to do well. It has to get up to the speed of your foil with as little drag as possible. It has to touch down really well, going straight, and then at an angle. And like, I think there's one other thing I'm blanking right now, but it's like not much.
The effect that the board has once it's out of the water makes any difference to like being able to go upwind, just having wind on the board, actually, like the aerodynamic, features of the board once it's out of the water?
It definitely does. I mean, like, certainly size matters a lot in that regard. And then as well as like, if you have a longer kind of board with like, rather than having like super flat rails, if you have something that the fluid, because it's the air is just a fluid coming at it, like say a oblique angle flowing over the board, is going to be better than something that's hitting a box and creating a bunch of drag. And then I think also having like a board that has the volume more centered throws you off less than having something like more bulbous in the front and the back. I think one thing that I've heard a lot is like, a lot of guys, they want that drop deck on the board, which I do think it has a real place, because you can have a higher volume board and then be closer to your foil, like the same thing by having a shorter mast. The downside of having the drop deck, or by the same thing as the bulbous nose, is you add all your volume where you least want it, which is you're adding, like some guys look at our boards, our 66 liters, 6 feet long. It's like, well, yeah, it's 6 feet long, but the front foot of it is like so thin and like it's not much swing weight.
Nothing,
Whereas
yeah.
if you had this big bulbous nose, now you've got that all out in front of you. Secondly, I would say that if when you're parawinging and you're in, like, let's just say it's like barely enough to get up or not enough to get up, and you're hauling on that parawing, the front of your nose, unless you're on like a real crazy sinker, is out of the water. So bulbous nose, all that volume is above the water line. So it is not floating you. It's actually sinking you. It's like, so it's not doing anything. The volume that's out of the water is not floating me.
I see.
It's sinking me. Like, it's minor. It's maybe, let's just say it's like 200 grams of board, but it's like, it's certainly not it's not displacing any water. So it's not causing any float.
I understand what you're saying now. So get that volume towards the middle makes the board just float, or use the volume to the most of its advantage.
Yeah.
Really.
The only volume that's floating you is that which is submerged. So if you're riding in those like really threshold position and you're looking and there's a bunch of volume out of the water, that volume can be removed with no downside. So when people are saying like, oh, I have this bulbous nose and it's adding 20 liters of volume, so I've got an 80 liter instead of a 60 liter. It's like, you don't really have an 80 liter in the conventional sense, because you haven't added water line, you haven't added volume that's submerged that's going to cause that flotation. So that would be like my criticism of the bulbous nose. The benefit of the bulbous nose, which is significant, is that for a beginner, like not a beginner, but somebody doesn't have great foil skills, or even anybody, the way you fall off these boards is often over the front, right? So with our 66 liter, for example, like there's not much volume up there. So it's a more technical board. If you start falling forward when you're not really moving, you're going to keep falling forward. Whereas if you have a big bulbous nose, now you've got this beach ball that you're plugging into the water and gives you that like positive riding moment. So that's kind of just like, it was something that I had to think a lot about, is like, what's the benefit of, and it was really a year or so ago when I was thinking about the emissary. It's like, where do I want to put the volume? And I think for a skilled rider, because you do want the board as thin as possible, but you really want the volume under you. And that is because that is what's submerged. So that's actually what's floating you. And then 2, you want the most water line as you can, and you want it as narrow as you can to get up, but you don't want that weight pushed out. So bringing that weight central, it's going to give you that kind of like shortboard kind of style turning without decreasing your light wind more than,
Mate, that makes so much sense.
Otherwise.
Like I like that idea. And I'm thinking to myself now, because I want to change my 85 liter board to something else. I have a very kind of old shape 85 liter board that I want to use when it's light wind, but it's not really conducive for those conditions just because of the dimension. So I'm thinking that now I have a 5.8 by 20 by 65 liters. That's what I'm using most days. And then when I want to do a light wind kind of riding, I'm thinking about something that's around 6'4", 6'6", max. 6'4", I think for me would be enough. Maybe around 20 and a half wide. And I want to have it at 85 liters still. But then what you're saying about keeping all that volume right at the center, this is where I'm thinking about the shape. That makes total sense for that board, and having a small nose, because it's going to be a little bit longer. It's still going to feel great if you have that volume placed in the right place.
Yeah. And I guess that would be my main point, is like, it's only helpful after you've got the board and tried it. So, but like, if you notice that you've added a bunch of volume to the nose and it's above the water when you're grinding and can barely get up, that volume is not helping you. It's helping you if you're tipping and falling off the board. But if you're at the skill level where you're more concerned about, I just want the smallest board possible in terms of swing weight, and I want to be able to get up in super light wind, then I would say that's really what you're looking at, is you're wanting most of the volume of your board to be submerged, to actually be floating you, not out of the water and there and
So you're
ready for
saying
stability.
that I can bring that 6.4 to maybe a 6.0 and have better volume placement, or it's that
I would say keep your length. Like the
Yeah.
length is pretty key because the length is how the length basically dictates when you transition from displacing water to planing. So, and it's not a smooth transition. Like a board that's moving will displace water and then the surfaces start creating lift just like a wing. And you're never going to be like on a wingboard. It's never going to be purely planing and skipping across the water. You'll be on foil, but that it's like the planing is kind of defined as like when you, if in a boat, you know, you create that bow wake, and then to like leave when you are officially in planing is when your boat has climbed over that bow wake. So that is just a function of length. So if you look at a ship that's moving like a container ship, they're going so fast, but they're not planing, like they're not getting up on step. And it's just because they're so long that they're not like crossing over that bow wake. So, and that takes a ton of energy to do that. And then the energy drops once you're in planing. So I think waterline is good, and you want the waterline. And of course, I mean, I think width is like, number one thing is comfort. If you go too narrow, like you just can't control your foil anymore unless you're, in Maui and on the water 7 days a week. So, and then as well as you thin out your board if you go, so there's like a compromise there with width that I think is like, to an individual preference, but I like waterline. But I guess my point is more like at your skill level, it's more like, I think a thinned out nose to have the length, but you don't need the volume there. You don't need to be dealing with that swing weight.
Nice.
If you can,
I think it's so cool
keep
to
it out
talk
of the
about
water.
that. I could talk to you for hours, mate. Look, I want to keep this under 2 hours because we're at 156 now. We have to have you back, man. I think if you have a chance to go to Hood, last 2 weeks of July will be incredible. If you are around, there's a lot of cool people heading down there, and it's going to be a Parawing fest. So
let's do it.
It'd be really cool to meet you there in person, get to ride your boards. I'm going to do that regardless because I'm really curious about how they feel. And I'm just a big fan of your stuff, man. I love the way you think. I love your products. The website's also clean. I love something that has that technical side, but it also has an artistic side and feeling supernatural. I think those words resonated with me very much. Like when you're on foil and you're doing this stuff, you feel like you have a superpower. And I think that's cool that you brought into your designs and allowing people to feel supernatural also. So well done, man.
Yeah.
And
thanks, Dan.
Thanks for coming on.
And well, I appreciate you hosting this, and I've gotten a ton out of your podcast and out of the interviews. So yeah, man, keep it up, and I'm stoked. I'll probably be there in Hood River at some point in that period. So
awesome, man. Well, let me know, and we'll see you there.
All right, talk to you later.